Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Heartfelt Conversations. My absolute pleasure today to be hosting this session. I know we've had a few lovely conversations helping us look at our professional as well as our personal development in different ways through the eyes and through the guidance of a lot of folks from very diverse backgrounds. So, we've had some freshers in 2 years into their career, we've had senior uh, executives who've moved out of the corporate space. We've had consultants who've come in as well. And each one of those conversations has been extremely enlightening for me. And I know that some of you really appreciated the same as well. So I've been kicked and motivated to get another set of fabulous guests onto the conversation this week. In fact, I was very, very motivated when I came across this awesome book that you might have seen online or in bookstores near you called Headstart. And what I found about it was that in this plethora of books that we have around us nowadays, which talk about productivity, deep work, motivation, mindset, and all of that, they miss the ball from one point only. I'm not saying that those books are not valuable, they're not helpful. They are by all means. I love those books. But the reality is that 90% of us are still struggling with the day to day modalities of surviving, thriving in our jobs in the corporate space, which is crazy, which is quite dynamic. And therefore, a book that throws more light on how we can actually look at the operationals of building a career right from the day we graduate out of our B schools or our engineering schools or any other institute, and then start climbing the corporate ladder. So, this book has been authored by none other than Vivek Gambhir and Sunder Ramachandran, and two fabulous individuals, professionals who've created their mark in the world of business. And I'm very, very thrilled to be able to invite them and host them this evening. So, without further ado, let me bring in Vivek first to the stage, and let's get chatting with him. As you know, Vivek is a very storied corporate executive. He's got a lot of laurels to his hat. He's been one of the founding team members of Bain. He's been the head of Godrej Consumer. And of course, he was one of the CEOs of Boat Lifestyle, a brand which all of us really know is one of the marquee brands to emerge out of the India space in the last few years. But what I like more about Vivek, and I think I've not told you this yet, Vivek, but last earlier this week when it was your birthday, I noticed a post one of your ex-reportees shared on LinkedIn, and the post was about how a group of your ex-reportees sent across a cake to your home. Now, that to me is a hallmark of a real leader, because the laurels one aside, the accolades on one side, but if your team continues to recognize you, show gratitude towards you years after they moved out and you've moved out, it speaks volume. So, honored to be able to chat with you, Vivek, and welcome to the Heartfelt Conversation podcast.
Thank you very much, Vikas. It's truly a pleasure. You've been such a big role model to so many people who have been looking to amp up their careers, Vikas. And some of the work that you've been building, working in terms of cultivating communities, is something that we all learn from. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Thank you.
Honor is all mine, Vivek. Thank you for joining us. Let me also bring in now the other author, the co-author of this book, another fabulous, rock star from the corporate world. That's the way I see Sundar, because he's got a career graph which is very, very impressive. He's worked across the financial space, consulting space, now the pharma space. He's had an entrepreneurial stint as well, which, in my mind, makes my respect for him go up 10x. But that's a very difficult space to be in. And of course, Sundar is also one of those very fine and rare, you can say, professionals who's moved different through different domains. So, from an HR role, he's now a commercial leader, and that too at a very, very high senior leadership level. He's managed the country. I think it was Sri Lanka, if I'm not mistaken, Sundar. So, those are some real stars you wear on your shirt sleeves. So, welcome, Sundar. And we kicked it off day one when we spoke, because our daughters, my elder daughter, happens to share the same name as his daughter. So there's no reason we wouldn't get along, right?
Hey, thank you, Vikas. Lovely to be on the platform. And like Vivek said, I've really admired the way you've sort of built out the community. And like I said to you when we spoke the first time, it's sort of rare to see senior HR leaders who are sort of comfortable putting themselves out there in spite of a fairly demanding day role that you do. So lovely to be here and looking forward to this chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Sundar. Again, pleasure's all mine. And we have the audience which has already started jumping in and with their very, very kind words that they've been looking forward to this conversation. Just flashing a few of those on the stage for everyone to, look at. And with that, I think without wasting too much time and coming between you and the audience today, I want to really unlock all that both of you have presented in this awesome book. It feels good, it smells good, and it really, I would say, tastes good because I've been digging into it this entire week. So tons of learning for me. But right now, before we get there, just want to understand what's keeping you excited nowadays.
Yeah.
Sure, Vivek.
Yeah, for us, I think at this stage, both Sundar and I are fairly high on life. For me, particularly, I think Vikas working with lots of exciting founders, supporting their scale up journeys. And then both Sundar and I getting a chance to learn from conversations like these on how we can support uplifting the career journeys of young professionals and giving them a head start.
And very similar, because I think the whole idea of one writing the book, which is a multi-year process, as you know, and then obviously at this point putting the word out, making sure that folks that we wrote the book for actually pick it up, find value, encouraging them, and that's a process by itself. So one that's actually teaching us quite a lot in terms of what resonates well, what are some of the career dilemmas that people are dealing with, some hypotheses that we built in the book, how many of those are checking out. So it's phenomenal. Just when we thought we've had a ride completing the book, we're just realizing it's actually day zero now, in terms of getting the word out there. Right? It's a very exciting phase at this juncture.
Superb. I'm so happy to hear that. And that actually takes me to the first real question of this podcast, which is what was the inspiration behind this behind this book, sorry. And what was that germ, what was that thought which got you both to kind of sync up and say, hey, let's do this?
Yeah, Vikas, just thinking about this now really takes me back to those first career steps in our journeys, which was all very exciting but really nerve-wracking at the same time and full of lessons. Landing that first job, figuring out how to grow, and honestly stumbling along the way. And it's a lot, but the reality is those early years, they're the foundation for everything: habits, confidence, perspective. And that's what really inspired Headstart. We've always loved mentoring young professionals. Their energy and curiosity are so contagious. And Sundar and I noticed a big gap in career advice. I think this is something, Vikas, you were also alluding to. So
Yeah.
much of it feels generic, not actionable, and often disconnected from what people in their trenches really need. And personally, for me, as a parent with two kids in their 20s, I've seen the unique challenges young leaders and people face today. And it really reinforced our belief that today's generation needs relatable, practical guidance to navigate this crucial stage. And Head Start is, in many ways, our efforts to try and bridge that gap. It's full of real stories from young leaders and insights from seasoned CEOs and entrepreneurs. It's packed with actionable steps. We call them Monday morning actions to help our readers take charge immediately. And ultimately, this book is about empowering young professionals to build their careers with confidence and clarity. They are the future, and if we can even guide them a little, then we're shaping something better. Vikas, you, Sundar, I, for all of us are in this quest to really try and make a difference to shape the next generation.
So lovely to hear that. I think I totally sync with that thought. In fact, Vivek reminded me of my time when, frankly, out of school, thrown into the world of work, no so-called coaching or life skills training imparted. One just had to figure out one's way. Now that was that period, which is almost 30 years ago, and now we are at the different end of the world where there's just too much information around. because there is blogs, there is videos, there is reels, and of course you have LinkedIn, and you've got all of that. So I think what your book is doing also, and I must compliment you for the way that the information has been presented, is that it's really in the form of a guide with very real life examples which you spoke about. And I think for students, for young professionals, it will be immensely valuable. So thank you for that. And also, I think at this stage, let me just flash the Monday blog that you published, because you spoke about how Monday is important, and that's something which I think I would recommend the audience to do check out, because it can be a great Kickstarter for your week. The guidance that Vivek shares there is truly, truly, insightful. And Sundar, what about you? What was your inspiration?
Well, I think, like Vivek said, one of my observation, in fact, when Vivek and I were chatting about this in the very early stages of thinking about the book, right? Over the last 10 years, specifically, Vikas, outside of a business or a commercial review that I normally do with my teams, every single conversation has actually ended up being a career conversation, right? It's either ended up being about, hey, should I stay or go? How do I navigate the landscape? Why am I not getting promoted? Why is my work not getting noticed? So obviously, as one looked back, it became fairly clear that just the appetite for career advisory is there. Just from the point of view to say, hey, is there even a demand for something like this? I think that's one end of the spectrum. And then, when we looked at what's available out there, two things, right? Either the recommendations were fairly esoteric to say, hey, very philosophical type of things, fairly generic, or hyperbole, dramatic,
Yeah.
clickbaity, right? What's the middle ground? I mean, we're operators. These are things we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. What actually works, right? Not in an artificial way, because at the end of the day, like we say in the book as well, this is not a short-term thing, right? This is not about you trying to be really clever, make one smart career move, and that's it. You're going to be doing this 30, 40 years, right? So how do you build a work ethic? How do you build rituals? How do you build practices that stay with you as you keep growing? And we thought there's need, given our lived experience of having been doing this for many, many years now, having made the mistakes ourselves, many of them, we thought it's good to codify and just make sure that people who are reading the book can avoid making the same mistakes. We say in the book, not every lesson is worth learning firsthand. So you make newer mistakes and then try and avoid some of the common mistakes that we've all made in our careers, right?
Yeah, those mistakes are ones we'd happily forget. And frankly, like you rightly said, I think the biggest wish that we all would have, I'm sure Vivek is also nodding there, is that others don't make the same mistake. So I'm sure your book will play a huge role there. At this point, I do want to let the audience know that, we're already seeing a lot of hashtag Headstarts in the comments, but we have a lucky draw. Our authors have been very kind enough to gift a book to a lucky draw winner who is able to win this lucky draw. All you need to do is in the comments, just type a sentence, word, or even a question with the hashtag Headstart. So do that. It'll be on for the next 40, 50 minutes that we are here, and one of you will win a book. So all the best for that. Getting back to the conversation, I do want to also get a sense of, again, there is always a reason for why a book is written. And in your case, like you rightly said, you want to guide the younger generation and ensure that they also build strong careers. But any particular instances, experience from your own personal corporate journeys, which played a pivotal role, and that is something that actually also became a bedrock for this book in a sense? Maybe you could go first this time, Sundar.
Oh, absolutely. I think there are so many moments, in my career so far, and I'm pretty much in the middle of it. You know, Lack of advisory often seems to be the biggest roadblock. Even if you're trying to be an entrepreneur, I mean, capital is quite easily available. Talent, you could argue, is out there. I think lack of good quality advisory coming to you at the right time can often be the make or break between a career move working out and not, right? So having been at the end of the spectrum where I've sort of felt helpless, where I felt like, hey, I wish I had, somebody to lean on who could actually, who can combine care with the intellect and the experience to offer such an advisory. And that combination, I've found, I mean, we've all been lucky. We've had bosses and leaders like that, but it's not something that's been consistent, right? And
Yeah.
that's what we're trying to solve for, which is to say, hey, you know what? How do we codify that? How do we make sure that Headstart actually becomes a guide that's available to young professionals? So when they're making key decisions in their career, they have a framework to refer to, and then see what works for them, and then move forward.
Superb. Thanks for throwing some light there. One of the uh, thoughts or one of the guiding points I picked up from the book, and I think from Vivek's blog as well, is that you've talked about balance isn't always a 50-50 split. And I think, Vivek, if you could just spend a few minutes talking about that, I think it'll be really brilliant, because that's not something you read. That's not something you see on the millions of posts that you see on a LinkedIn every day. So,
Yeah, I think because there's obviously a lot of discussion that's currently happening upon work-life balance and sustainability. But at different phases of one's career, it's important to be able to end up figuring out whether the ratio is going to be 80-20, 50-50, or 20-80, right? And that answer will keep on changing throughout one's career, based on what one is prioritizing, what one's values, and how badly one wants something. I remember once reading a wonderful post by, I think, Mark Manson, who talked about, how much pain are you actually willing to endure for what you want? Most of us don't think in terms of pain, but the reality is, depending on what you want, there's a huge amount of sacrifices that one is required to make. And typically, what we've seen is, look, in the early parts of one's career, there is no substitute for hard work, there's no substitute for grit, and there's no substitute for learning. The important thing is to be able to find fulfillment. And I think our belief is, if you're really enjoying work, if you're really loving what you're doing, if you're really learning, then this whole idea of work life balance actually becomes a lot less relevant. I think what's much more important is a way for us to find a way to integrate work and life, find that harmony. But that balance, I think for some people who can find it, it's great. But generally, that balance tends to be fairly elusive. We need to be able to nurture our whole selves, find different ways to be able to actually optimize our life and our work. But rather than thinking about balance, it's much more important to think about a continuum, or integrating both those various aspects to find more joy and fulfillment.
awesome. I think learning, not only for me, but for the entire community, I'm sure, because the moment you hear the word balance, it's 50-50 which hits you. And this completely, destroys that paradigm, which is something that will definitely stay with me for the rest of my career as well. Vivek, thanks for that. From this book, there is another very deep insight. And, in recent years, to some extent, people have been talking about it, but the way it has been presented so lucidly in black and white is something that it really struck home. I want to actually read out that sentence for my audience, if you permit me. It's a chapter called Show Boss Brilliance. And I think it's under the larger ambit of become a boss magnet, right? And again, I come back to the same point, that when we started a career, when you read HR textbooks, when you read the Stephen Covey's kind of books, none of them talk about these real practical pieces, which are that you need a good, positive, functional relationship with your boss if you want to do well in your career and your company. So the sentence that I want to read is very, very interesting, because it made me think a lot. It's play the non-linear game. It's easy to focus on immediate tasks assigned by your boss, but these are short-term goals. Playing short-term games leads to predictable linear outcomes. To excel in the long-term game, observe what individuals in roles above you are doing. So, Vivek and Sundar, I would just love for you guys to expand on this a bit, talk about this whole become a boss magnet concept, because I think for young professionals, it'll be really an eye opener.
Sure. So I think because the whole idea there, and this is a mistake I've made in the early parts of my career, right, which is not recognizing that the titles and the roles follow the behaviors. You got to get the behaviors first, right? You've got to show up as a leader first, and then of course you'll be seen, and then everything else, the crown will follow, as we say, right? So I think that's one part of the story. But really, I think the way we think about being a boss magnet, not in an artificial suck up to your boss type of a way, right? Which often is sort of the casual narrative that
Um,
floats around. It's really about one understanding what is the functional operational style of your boss. And every individual, every manager has one. We have a certain style. So team members who are able to appreciate where we're coming from, what's the personality trait that we generally have, what are some of our likes and dislikes, just taking the time to understand who your boss is as an individual, as a person, I think that's a good first step. Two, your boss has a mandate. They're not working in isolation. Their mandate is not just to manage you. They have a
yeah.
broader mandate within the organization. What is that mandate? Can you shine the light on that? Can you become their linchpin? And we're encouraging a lot of professionals to think in terms of value, right? What creates value for the organization? What creates value for your boss? If you can identify that, articulate that, play that back to your boss, why would you not be his or her favorite? Often when we use the word, well, XYZ is the boss's favorite, we often mean it in a sort of a sinister type of way, right? It doesn't have to be that way, right? I mean, you could be your boss's favorite because you completely are aligned to what the agenda that she's trying to drive. You understand her at a human, at a personal level, and it's a win-win. You're not trying to do this, to sort of win brownie points. You're actually doing yourself a favor, and you're shining the light on her at the same time. So that's the mindset we are encouraging people to adopt when we use the term the boss magnet.
Superb. And I think you've also mentioned somewhere in the book, I remember that please also understand that your boss is not only just drinking coffee, he's doing a lot more. So I think it's time also to talk about these things, because again, the narrative that you see online nowadays is the boss is the evil, villain who's come to the planet and is about to kill all humanity, including you first. So uh, bosses are important. Let's recognize that working with them well is important, and I think this piece of guidance which you just said shared, Sundar, is absolutely bang on. So thanks for that. Vivek, would you like to add something on this one?
Yeah, in the book we definitely spend a lot of time covering it, and this is a chapter which Sundar and I thought a lot about, right? And the reality is the word magnet was quite carefully chosen, because the idea of being a magnet is to try and figure out a way in which how you can really stick to your boss, become indispensable. And this is not really about sucking up, but as we say in the book, your boss can be the wind beneath your wing, or the dead weight dragging you down. And in many ways, each of us has the power to actually shape that relationship. And we all start off by believing that bosses are supposed to manage us. Yes, your boss is there to guide you, but I think a lot of us end up forgetting that we are in this together, and our bosses need us as much as we need them. And we use this analogy of a dance in the book, that both of you both need to be actually in sync. And because we get into some tools in the book, such as the 2x2 2+2 stakeholder engagement plan. We talk about the power of feedback. Sundar talked about the need to really showcase boss brilliance, as you were saying. But we also talk about treading the rough waters. There will be
Hmm.
situations when you just can't click with your boss, however hard you try. And as the cliche goes, people don't tend to leave companies; they leave managers. So the reality again is that we do talk about, if you don't really get along with your boss, what do you end up doing then?
Superb. And I think we already have a few comments which are acknowledging that what they're learning from this is very valuable. And I congratulate Munish on his first placement. Hope you have a very long and successful career. Do pick up this book, because I can tell you from honest experience, these are very, very real stories which our authors have shared. These are very real and common mistakes which all of us have made. And we would wish that you don't make the same mistake. So uh, please go ahead and pick up this book if you don't win it today, that is. So we'll hope that you win it also, but let's see. So, moving on, and before we do that, just want to remind our audience that we'll take questions from you as well. So, please put them in the comments. I'll pick up a few interesting questions for our speakers to respond to. The question that I have next is, the role of continuous learning. Again, one of your main pillars in the book that you both speak about is being an avid learner. And I know there's a lot of buzz around it nowadays, continuous learning, 360 degree learning, and all of that. But what does it actually mean to you, and how can everyone, regardless of role, integrate this mindset into the work?
Yeah, Vikas, look, as we all know, in today's fast-paced world, given with the way things are changing, just having a degree isn't enough. So the whole idea of, I think, continuous learning is really about relevance. How do you stay relevant, keep learning new skills, and ultimately stand out? And this section on being an avid learner is all about changing, how each of us sees learning. It's not about memorizing facts or just earning degrees. I think a lot of what we're advocating is about staying curious, learning really what matters, and making learning a regular part of our everyday work lives. So we go into a systematic approach in terms of how to develop a learning plan. We tee up this idea of creating a to-learn list. We talk about cultivating learning networks, and we talk about things which you can do on the job as well, such as stretch assignments. And in the book, we introduce a simple but a very powerful tool, what we call LDST. This is something which Sunder had come up with. LDST stands for learn, do, share, and teach. And it's really a cycle. It's a cycle that helps you take what you've learned, apply it, share it with others, and eventually teach it. And so, a lot of our focus on the book again in this chapter is to give lots of practical tools uh, to help people actually learn smarter and faster, to be able to stay ahead. And we have this wonderful story, I think, of someone I know quite well. It's a disguised name called Tejas. It's a real story. Tejas went to an Ivy League university. So he had the degree, he worked as an analyst, went to graduate school. But his love for learning was so much that he actually became a monk, for a year, and now works in the venture investing space, which, as you know, is an area where which places a very high premium on learning. And Tejas in the book writes that technically one doesn't have to do anything, including learning. This is not a diktat imprinted in the laws of the universe. I learn because it fundamentally brings joy. By virtue of it being intrinsic, the only goalpost I'm linking to is my self confidence and joy. My learning philosophy is 80% intrinsic, but 20% extrinsic. It has both elements. While learning provides a sense of joy, it usually only does so when one enters a state of flow. Very few will get out of bed just for the pure joy of learning. Most wake up for a practical purpose because they have goals or needs that are often tied to extrinsic reasons, a job promotion or a key project at work. As I see, as a result, I see extrinsic reasons as a fuel to get started, and I see intrinsic reasons as a way to keep going.
Wow. I would love to just have that framed and put on my workstation right above my screen for a lovely reminder every day. Superb.
And because
And
if I can add, I mean,
of course,
thank you, Vivek, for reading that excerpt, right? I mean, that tells you, I mean, those are the sort of stories we have in the book. But one of the ideas that, Vivek and I are also trying to encourage professionals to think of, learning in the enterprise context, personal learning is no longer personal the moment you join the workforce, right? What you learn has to unlock value for your enterprise, has to unlock value for your teams, right? It's not an academic endeavor that you're just passing an exam and getting a degree, right? Now it's about, hey, fine, you've gotten better, but as a consequence of you having gotten better, are you showing up better as a manager, leader, team member? Are you able to solve business problems faster? Are you thinking more broadly? So I think the whole idea and therefore the need for continuous learning, if you think of this as a hip pocket skill, as a professional skill set, what you're basically giving yourself is cover fire, because you don't know what's going to change. None of us do. I mean, it'll be naive for any of us to crystal gaze about what the landscape's going to look like 3 5 years down the line.
True.
What you do know is things are going to be very very different. What's going to be the degree of that change? What tools will we be using? What will be relevant? What won't be relevant? These are the variables. But if you know how to learn, how to cope with change, how to very quickly have a mechanism to pick up a skill, whatever the world is going to throw at us, and it will be interesting for all of us, you have a coping mechanism. So we are encouraging folks to say, think of continuous learning as cover fire, as your coping mechanism, so that you're ready, whatever life throws at you.
Beautiful perspective, and I must congratulate and thank you for the LDST framework, which Vivek credited to you. I think it's easy to remember and follow once one is able to remember. And moving on, just want to remind our audience that we have the lucky draw still on. We've got about 9 hits already there, so the competition is heating up. Those of you not yet commented with the hashtag Headstart, feel free to do so. You might just win a copy of this lovely book. Moving on, I just want to also get a little insight from you in terms of the volatility that we are seeing in the business environment now, getting into 2025. And I'm glad we're having this conversation just a little over, I mean, one day over 1 month to go before the year end runs out. How can executives build resilience and maintain a focus on long term growth? The markets are just moving, the business environment is just haywire at this point, if you ask me.
Yeah, Vikas, I think, this is one of the biggest challenges, honestly, all of us continue to face is how do you really build the muscle to be able to cope with the increasing volatility and uncertainty and emerge stronger. The reality, though, at the end of the day, is that careers for most of us, unless we are lucky enough to, strike rich through a billion-dollar unicorn startup, which rarely happens, but careers are going to span 4 decades or more for all of us. And so I think as we talk in the book, and that's the last chapter in the book, is about really developing a marathon mindset. And there's a lot we can learn from marathon runners. And fittingly enough, there's a lovely story in that chapter by Vinita Singh, the co-founder of Sugar Cosmetics. She's actually a marathon runner, and she
Yes.
talks about some of the lessons she's learned from running marathons in terms of being able to really be able to develop more resilience. Clearly, look, quick wins, short term, wins are very important. No debate and doubt on that. But I think all of us find out after decades of a career is that what leads to lasting success is sustained effort. And the interesting part, about resilience is that most people talk about resilience as bouncing back. What we talk in the book about resilience is that resilience is actually about bouncing forward, not back, stronger than ever before. And it's so important to keep things in perspective. Is the glass half full or half empty? Is it half water or half air? But it's so critical to take a cool, clear eyed look at the reality in front of us without getting swayed by excessive optimism or pessimism. If we can control the story that we tell ourselves, we can't control every outcome clearly, but we can control the steps or the actions that we are taking. So the starting step is really to have self belief, have the conviction, and really focus on making the right kind of an effort. But the journey in a time like this can be very grueling. So it's so important to build in recovery. It's so important to build in self care and recharge yourself. And the other part we talk in the book again at times like this is really focus on the small things you can do every day. I think if we can all focus on getting 1% better every day, the power of compounding is absolutely massive. And we talk about this in the context of micro resilience. And so rather than worrying about trying to be able to fix everything and trying to control so many things that are out of our hands, we can't control, how fast the economy will grow. No, we can't control when the next pandemic may or may not happen. But what we can control is the efforts we are making. We can control having conviction and self belief. And we can control the power of compounding and micro resilience. If we can get those right, while we keep on focusing a little bit on ourselves and self care, I think that's really what leads to sustained success over a longer period of time.
And because if I can just add, one of the
Please.
things we've spoken about in the book, right, is this, like Vivek said, right, just being kind to yourself, and we can't overstate the importance of that, right? I mean, often in careers, when we're coaching people, we find, well, as much as we may like to think the world's getting in your way, we are actually our biggest enemies. We're getting in our own way, right? I mean, just think about some of the language that we use, especially when chips are down,
Yeah.
right? We don't need external critics. We are our harshest critic, and that, when we use harsh language for our own self, that will manifest, right? I mean, everyone else is going to see us the way we see ourselves. So I think important to sort of, stay calm even when things don't work out, or you're having a bad phase in your career, and all of us do. Things are not always going to be hunky dory. In those moments, just to stay composed, not lose the self belief and conviction, and then keep telling yourself that, look, this too shall pass, and it always does. And the moment you have that longitudinal perspective to say you're going to be doing this 20, 30 years, so one bad year, one bad cycle, 6 months of underperformance, maybe you lost a job because of some organizational restructuring, you're going to look back at it several years down the line and think, hey, I made too much of a big deal about it. It wasn't even that bad, right? So that perspective, not to get too worried, not to sort of make the wrong choices in the moment because you're in a low phase, is super important. So yeah, we've all been through that through the book. We also want to give confidence to all the younger professionals that, look, if you're going through stuff, you have company. All of us have been through that. It always gets better. So stay at it.
Brilliant. I think both you and Vivek have shared pure gems as response to the last question. And I think if there was some way I could just replay that recording right now itself, I'd probably do that, because that's a strong message and a very important message for the community to hear. And each one of us, we've done our 20, 30 years in the corporate space broadly. I'm sure we can shake hands on the fact, like you rightly said, that there are going to be ups and downs. It's not always upward moving graph. And we've seen it with the stock markets, we've seen it with industries. Things go downhill sometimes, they recover equally fast or equally slowly. So there's no reason to get dejected. Just keep the path. The good thing is now, at least the larger majority, in fact, which is the younger lot which is entering the workforce, or the ones who are in that middle of the pyramid kind of space, have a book like this which can be their guiding force. So can't re-emphasize enough that you should pick up this book and spend some quality time with it, because this will be far more valuable in the long run versus a cocktail dinner outside or a movie that you may want to catch on the weekend. But to each his own, we can only provide a window. Sorry, Vivek.
Much cheaper than that, also,
Much
So
cheaper. 100% agree with you on that. But the good part is, I think what is really sparking questions and conversations here from the younger lot, and I want to bring up one. I have a lot of my own questions still parked there, but I do want to give priority to our audience. And there's Anshu here who's got a very relevant question for you there. How do we compete with AI in building a career? So, uh, our generation probably didn't face that much of a big issue, though we are also getting there now. But it seems we will need to compete with AI at some level. So, any thoughts on this?
Vivek actually has a front row seat to everything that's happening in that world, given his role in ventures. Vivek, please, if you could go for that.
Probably we need to organize another podcast just for that bit. But anyway, Vivek, let's hear you.
you know, I think ultimately the power of AI is absolutely immense. As we know, Vikas and Anshu, thanks for such a great question. This is something that all of us are grappling with. Uh, we can't ignore AI. I think we have to learn to embrace AI. We have to find a way to be able to actually work with AI. And I remember reading somewhere that you are less likely to lose a job to AI, but more likely to lose a job to a person who knows how to use AI, right? And that's the reality we'll end up facing. Uh, let's see what's going to remain constant, right? What will not change are some of the things such as empathy, compassion, communication skills, collaboration skills, team building skills. Those skills are going to be absolutely timeless. So it's very important to continue focusing on actually what I call the software here. But at the same time, I think given some of the changes that are happening with AI, AI is going to impact every single facet of our life. It's going to impact every single industry and career. So the onus is all upon us to be able to figure out how best to leverage the power of AI. For those of you, who enjoy coding, I think coding skills are a very important requirement for almost every single industry or career. And it's not about the language of coding. What coding stands for is problem solving skills, right? So how do you actually, get much better at problem solving skills to be able to better use AI? And what I'm seeing is honestly what a lot of experts are calling fusion skills, which is about number one, learning how to use AI, the techniques of AI. Number two is how do you actually use your judgment and how do you implant your judgment into using AI? And then the third is actually how do you train AI to your advantage? But for all of us, I think finding a way to create this fusion of skills is very very important. I'm hoping that the world of the future actually is a world which looks at being able to blend in both the human aspects and the technology aspects.
Awesome. And in fact, I have this personal story to share. Just earlier today, I had a masterclass on ChatGPT uh, by my 11-year-old daughter. So, incidentally, what ended up happening was she has a test on Monday and she was preparing for it. Both my wife and I were unable to spend time and do that quizzing. She utilized ChatGPT, fed in the entire content of the chapter into the engine, and got ChatGPT to throw out questions to quiz her. And I was just mind struck. I was like, this is what the future generation is already doing. So I better need to get my act together now, and I'll probably spending more time with you, Vivek.
Yeah, and I think like Vivek said, one of the things I see, in a very practical context of dealing with some of the questions that a lot of team members have, right? People often get confused about, oh, well, there's so much news we read about AI. Well, do I need to now train myself in some sort of a language models? Do I need to understand what's out there? They're thinking the enterprise architecture. Uh, what I'm trying to do, even at a personal level, is to sort of break it down. I mean, so much of AI is just consumer class, right?
Yeah.
Like what your daughter did, right? So I think this is not spectator sport. So the more fluency we build as users, the easier will it be for us to appreciate the enterprise context of AI as and when it becomes more mainstream. So as an example, I mean, we're all writing emails. Can you use AI to structure your emails better? We're all doing basic level of analysis. There are consumer apps out there. Can you use AI to sort of get some more, mine a few more, massage a few more insights, right? We all plan travel. Can you use AI, train it on what your family is like? What do they like, dislike? Let the AI do a little bit of level one travel plan itinerary. I think basic things. How do we integrate it into stuff that we all do? Not big fancy stuff, not driverless cars and things like that. Stuff that we all do. And as we become more fluent, when it hits us, when the enterprise throws us something, our appreciation. So today, what happens, because people are not very fluent even in their day-to-day activities, you suddenly get very overwhelmed when AI in the organizational context gets used, right? I do want to plug in something really interesting. So because everyone who's logged in obviously is very interested in advisory. There's a very interesting website. I mean, I'm sure all of us have heard of Marshall Goldsmith, the very globally well-known coach who wrote this book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There.
Right.
Fractal Analytics, which is an AI firm, have actually created an entire AI website for Marshall, right? It's called marshallgoldsmith.ai. You can Google it and maybe hyperlink it there. And all of what Marshall has written, spoken, put out there over the last 30 years, the models got trained on it. And now you have Marshall Goldsmith coaching each one of you completely free of cost. You can ask Marshall any questions about career, leadership, dilemmas, this and that. And there we go. Marshall in his avatar will answer you, right? I mean, that's where we are today. This is already live and available. So maybe the next conversation you're having with your future set of authors would maybe with two AI avatars who've written a book, right? Who knows? That's not very far away.
Wow, wow, that's mind blowing. And you're certainly going to get a lot of hate messages on LinkedIn from all the coaches we have there. but, but thank you for letting us know about that. Very, very insightful, Sundar. And thank you, Anshu. I hope that answers your question and more. I'm sure it did. Uh, for taking that away. And at this point, with the speaker's permission, given that we have some lovely questions coming up, I do want to request you to give a couple of copies of your book for the best questions as well. So keep that in mind if you would like to do that.
It'll be our pleasure.
Super. So the next question on the screen that I wanted to bring in is from Abhishek Bansal. His question is it rather difficult to manage the young workforce at present, or was it always like this hard? So he's obviously struggling with a few of his team members, it seems.
Abhishek, great question. Every generation thinks the same, So I'm sure our parents thought how difficult, you were. But for us, what Sundar and I find very energizing about Gen Z and young millennials is the kind of courage that they have, the boldness, and the kind of opportunities that we see in this generation. Obviously, I think the kind of pressures this generation is facing because of technology, social media, the kind of challenges that the world is facing with the environment and climate change make mental health probably a much bigger priority than it's been ever before. But in our mind, I think every single generation will have a certain amounts of nuances. The context is very important. But I think for both Sundar and I, we look at the upside and say, look, there's so much opportunity. There's so much one can learn from the current generation. So focus far more on what is working and find a way to harness their full potential. And there will be the inevitable ways of working, which will be somewhat different. And that's honestly, part of our learning as well in terms of how we continue to learn to be able to enable the next generation to thrive.
I think what I find very refreshing is even 20 years back, at least I would be very wary of opening up and giving any direct feedback to senior leaders or bosses. But it's refreshing that that's changed, and I think managers, all of us who are managers today can actually benefit so much from that. I mean, just to give you a very specific example, I've had young colleagues we hire out of business schools who are sort of management trainees on a leadership track, so to say, what we call the management trainee track. Go through a deck that you're preparing for a review and come back and say, boss, your storyline really sucks, right? And they've had the confidence to say that in so many words, right? And then give suggestions to say how might we make this better. So I think depending on if you have the ability and if you have the appreciation for where they're coming from and not get too worried about sometimes the language they may use and sort of the casual manner of fact approach they may have, there's so much you can actually extract out of how outspoken they are and what they bring to the table. So it's in a way it's placing demand on all mid-level managers and leaders right now to mature up, be more open to feedback, and really make the most of what these guys have to offer.
Cool. In fact, I have a follow-up question to that, Sundar and Vivek. The reason I'm asking that is that, again, having a ringside view to young talent, to today's workforce, if I might say so, there is a tendency, there is a observation that the kind of years or attachment that previous generations like ours would have with an organization and is not the same anymore. Generally the pattern seems to be I will come into work, I will do my best, I will get rewarded for it, but I'm not wedded to this organization, and should something more interesting, more remunerative come up, I will go down that path. Have you also observed a similar trend? Is that something that is going to be part of our lives going forward? And if so, then how do we kind of, as leaders, managers, approach this?
Yeah. Look, I think the definition of what work is and what people are looking for in their lives is certainly changing. For many of us, 20, 30 years ago, Vikas, our lives were completely defined by our jobs, right?
Yeah.
Today's individuals are looking for far more than just work, all right? And they're looking for much more wholesome lives.
Yeah.
But that can also be a big advantage, I think, right? When you start seeing trends such as quiet quitting, when you start seeing things such as the pressures on issues of mental health, clearly I think the onus is on organizations. I think organizations in many ways have let young professionals down. Look at the amount of layoffs that have been happening, right? So you can't expect employees to have lifetime loyalty when a company can't guarantee lifetime employment either, right? It actually has to go both ways. But given the way the world is changing, I think the employer employee contract in many ways is going through a fundamental shift. So in that environment, I think while we can't expect employees to be very loyal to companies, if we're not fulfilling some of their needs at work as well, and the needs outside of work as well. So I think the onus on organizations is to really humanize work. I think we talk about HR, but the human part about HR has actually honestly, gone missing. So this is an opportunity for organizations to really recraft what it truly means to engage employees, what it means to reward them and motivate them. So I think if we can, really find a way to humanize work, I think this problem will become a lot less over time.
Very valuable. In fact, Vivek, when you say it, and you say it in as many clear, direct words as that, HR needs to introspect, needs to discuss and get more integrated with business, and have a larger, I would say, conversation in the context of making sure that, like you said, the equation has to be both ways. If employees are expected to be long engaged for the long term, corporates and the business also should be willing and open to creating the roadmap and enabling them to be associated for a long term, rather than looking at quarterly balance sheets and taking direct actions on account of that. So thank you for putting it out there. uh,
Because can I just also add, especially for I think a lot of folks who are starting out or maybe in the mid stage, I think when we think about engagement in the organizational context, we can be unidimensional, right? We think about, well, it's something that's being done to you by the company. So it's almost the organization's responsibility to engage you, right? Humor
yeah,
you, keep indulge you, engage you, so on and so forth. Well, I think you have skin in the game as well, and I think if all of us as professionals, it's our responsibility to engage ourselves. It's our responsibility to outreach, find ways through which we can find a connect with the context, with the companies we all work for. Every company, every business, every context is a combination. There's never going to be, every day is not going to be a good day, but every company has enough reasons to be loved for, right? So
yeah,
it's also the individual's responsibility to be pragmatic and say, what is it about this environment, what is it about this culture, what is it about this company that I can sort of connect with, and that becomes your anchor. Because otherwise you're going to have a bad day and you're going to start thinking, hey, I think I should quit. Correct.
cool.
So that balance, because who are we to prescribe and say what's the right duration? Should you stay with the company for 1 year, 2 year, 5 years? To each his own, right? But the idea is to say, when you make the decision, when you choose to transition, have you thought it through, right? And then obviously, we've all made that mistake. Whenever you make decisions when you're feeling low, they usually turn out to be poor, right?
Of course.
Just give yourself time, right? Is the idea.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yes, total sense. In fact, we have a lot of audience members who are kind of agreeing with whatever is being shared in this conversation. I know that the nuggets of wisdom that we are continuing to grab from you will continue to add value, because we'll create small snippets of these and share them on our timelines. uh, I have another question which I wanted to table to you, both of you. If there was one piece of advice which you could give your younger self, knowing what you know now, what would it be? And would that advice, or how would that advice apply to all professionals?
Um, yeah, I would say, because, embrace your own journey. In your 20s, it really is easy to feel like you're racing against time, and everybody around you seems to have a clear plan, a perfectly curated LinkedIn profile. But here is the truth: nobody has it all figured out, and that's completely fine. I think, as we realized after many years, careers aren't a straight line. It's more of a winding road full of unexpected turns, detours, and the occasional bumps. The key is to really stay open, be curious, and not be afraid to take a different route when things don't go as planned. And real success is not about following somebody else's playbook. It is about writing your own story one page at a time. So our advice to everyone would be is give yourself permission to explore, pivot, and define what success looks like for you.
Lovely.
Yeah,
Sundar,
for me, Vikas, I think it took me 10 to 12 years because I made this. I didn't learn quickly, but almost the first decade or the decade and a half, I spent a significant amount of time proving how smart I am, showing people that I'm the cleverest in the room, and that didn't work out well at all. It ruffled people the wrong way. It gave me suboptimal outcomes, and so looking back, I think if I had been given the advisory to shine the light on others a lot more, leverage others a lot more versus showing how smart I am and therefore I deserve to be the leader, I think the outcomes would have been even better. And when I say better, not just in terms of career outcomes or promotions or anything like that, just better in terms of the quality of relationships, the mark, because some of the errors you make, especially in terms of relationships, when you move fast in your career, and you don't show up in your best possible self, it leaves a mark on the people. And I think that stays with you and that stays with them. Everything else in
yeah,
terms of titles, all of those things check out, but it becomes difficult to mend. If you didn't treat somebody the best possible way, it's difficult to mend that, right? I think those are some of the errors I made, and I wish people understand that it's a team sport. It's not about you. So take it easy. Just give others the room and space to shine more.
yeah. And in fact, I loved what you shared, Sundar. It kind of immediately triggered and reminded me of a statement I picked up from Vivek's blog again. It said something to the effect of don't confuse titles with trajectory. And that's, I think, a mistake, at least I can own up here on this live session, that I've made. Choosing one alternate over the other on account of a title which was weightier, and in the long term I think that was a foolish mistake on my part. But thank you for bringing that out. Vivek, would you want to just spend a minute or so just talking about that, because it's a very valuable insight, I think.
Yeah. I think because what ends up happening is that all of us need validation in life, right? And we're looking for these markers. And when we're not really clear about what direction our careers are headed in, if we're not clear about what are we learning, then we look for a lot of external markers. And these external markers, I think they're all important to us. We all have a huge need for validation, whether it's compensation, whether it's promotions or titles. But when the entire focus actually becomes on chasing these extrinsic markers of success, then tend to actually end up focusing a lot less on some of the internal markers, which is all about growth, curiosity, learning, and progression. And so, in some ways, we end up winning in the short term, but unfortunately, then we realize at some point our careers are stalling because we haven't developed the self awareness, we haven't developed the learning agility to keep on progressing. And that's why when you see the big difference between people who have very successful 30 or 40-year careers versus people who end up plateauing, is this excessive focus on short term markers like promotions and titles at the expense of what really, as you were asking before, things like resilience. I think focusing far more on those actually makes for much stronger longer term careers.
Definitely food for thought, Vivek. I think internal markers, curiosity, learning, growth, eye opening in a lot of ways. That's going to stay with me for sure. And my dear friend Aniket, and a community member, has already picked up your blog and has referred to this minimum viable day, which you just written about earlier this week. So for my audience, I can only say one thing: that if that is something you already picked up from a blog available out there, it should serve as a trailer to what's packed in this book. That's something that Sundar and Vivek have put together, combined 50 years of experience, insights across organizations from different domains, different sizes, global organizations, and having, like they've owned up a number of times during this on our podcast through their mistakes, through their wins. And it's a secret sauce, if you ask me. So do pick that up. We're just about 1 minute to go. So what I'd love to do right now is just help decide who the winner of the lucky draw is. So I'm going to go ahead and draw, and let's see who our winner is today.
And Vikas, given what a wonderful audience it has been, we are more than happy to give 3 or 4 books. So you decide.
Superb. So, Adhir, congratulations. You won the book, at least from the lucky draw standpoint. And we'll make sure that this book is couriered to you. Just make sure that you drop me a message after this podcast with your contact details and address. And we'll make sure that this lovely book is delivered to you very soon. Thank you so much for that. And Vivek, Sunder, it was a lovely conversation. We do have a few more questions coming into the chat, but we're totally out of time. But I think a few people do deserve that book, and you would probably join me in congratulating them. There was a question I remember earlier from Abhishek Nagpal, if I'm not mistaken. I'll just try and bring it up. That was a question that you took. Abhishek Bansal, my apologies.
Well, Anshu,
and Anshu, yes. So I'm trying to see if I can pull it up again. The timeline has gone haywire this evening with the comments. So we will bring that up. Just give me a moment. Adhir has already won the book. So yes, that was Anshu here. We have a question up there. Not the question, but I think her response to that. But yes, we put that up as well. And I think Aniket as well for that lovely insight, which I'm sure will drive a lot of people to both the blog as well as the book. So with that, let's congratulate these winners.
congratulations.
And I know for a fact that seeing what both of you are doing for the community, I'm sure they would be you'll be more than happy to respond to any queries they may have after this conversation. I'm sure they can connect with you on LinkedIn, drop in their questions, and hope to receive some response from you. So it's been a valuable session for me.
I just wanted to share, of course, both Vivek and I would love to hear from folks. Our email IDs are actually in the book, of course, our LinkedIn profiles as well. But all the stories, some of the wonderful stories that Vivek read out as well, we've actually provided the LinkedIn links for all of the folks we've quoted in the book. And we are encouraging the audience to actually go connect with them. These are real leaders who've had real dilemmas. So connect with them, learn from them, build that learning network for yourself as well. So yeah, that's our hope.
And thank you then, everyone. This was a wonderful conversation. I'm presently going to just go back and soak in all the lovely insights and messages I have received from both Vivek and Sunder. Thank you, Kanan. You kind of summarizing the discussion in a very crisp manner, and I think that will stay with us as well. Wish you all the best. Do pick up the book, do put into practice the learnings, and I'm sure you will all have a wonderful career ahead of yourself.
Thank you, Vikas.
See you on the other side.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you very much, Vikas.
Thank you.
Thank you.